Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Winter Outlook 2021-2022 webinar. My name is Luca Nuvoli. I'm a communication analyst at ENTSO-E, and I will be moderating this presentation. Welcome, everyone. This is a joint publication between ENTSO-G and ENTSO-E. So for today, I would like to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Jacques Raberol, the ENTSO-G Modeling and Subject Manager.
Good morning.
Good morning, welcome, Jacques. And we have Lukas Galdikas, ENTSO-E Adequacy Specialist. Welcome, Lukas.
Good morning, everyone, as well.
Yeah. So they both Jacques and Lukas will hold some presentations, and after the presentations, there will be a 5-minute break. After which we would like to hear from you. So there will be a Q&A session after the break. You can ask your questions by typing them in the chat box. Just as a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. So the webinar is currently being recorded. As you know, the purpose of the adequacy. Okay, the purpose of the seasonal outlook is to assess the adequacy situation, to prevent and mitigate the risks to security and of supply, in this case during the winter period. The aim is also to inform our stakeholders, interested parties about the adequacy situation regarding gas and electricity at the pan-European level, and it is also to allow the exchange of information between ENTSO-E and ENTSO-G regarding their respective systems. Without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Jacques, who will present the winter outlook from ENTSO-G from a gas perspective. So, Jacques, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca. Good morning, everybody. So I will present you the results of the winter supply outlooks for the gas infrastructure. The main objectives. Can you go to the next slide, Lucas or Luca? Thank you. The main objective of the winter supply outlook is the analysis investigates the possible evolution of supply and the UGS inventory from this along the season from the 1st October to 31st of March, as well as the ability of gas infrastructure to answer supply and demand adequacy, especially in high demand situation that we will see in the assumptions. So the assumptions for this winter supply outlook are the sensitivity analysis in the different demand conditions in reference winter. Demand values are provided by TSOs. It's monthly values, and the cold winter. The cold winter are the highest demand since 2009 and 10. And these demand values for cold winter have been refreshed for the SOS report 2021. This report has been published in last week, I think, or this week, I don't remember yet, but it's a new report, SOS report. The peak day is the highest values for one day in 20 years. And the 2-week cold spell is the 2-week highest values in 20 years. And the import potential are based on 10-year history flow. So this is the most important assumptions for the winter supply outlook. The supply situations about the storage. The storage inventory level on 1st October is one of the lowest of recent 9 years. Due to a low storage level at the end of previous winter, and limited injection during this summer period. And we will go on this limited injection later. And you can see here on the map the storage levels at the 1st of October. So we estimate that when we are lower than 50%, 70%, we are in a high risk. So it was the case for Germany, Netherlands, and Austria. And you can see in some in other countries we estimated that we were not in risk for the other countries. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is here. You can find here the results of the simulations in for the reference on cold winter in the different demand situations. So the conclusion first is that no country is exposed to demand curtailment in case of a normal or cold winter, including a peak day on 2-week spell. And what we can see that the indigenous production keeps on decreasing, and the UGS can provide flexibility for the winter. Secondly, the 30% UGS level can be achieved in case of an average on cold winter in all demand situations. It's what you have in the first in the graph. You can see that we can reach in reference winter the 30%, and for cold winter we had 28%. So for this in these situations we have the storages are at 70% and 65% of withdrawal capacity. And for high demand situations that we are simulating in the middle of February, we have enough capacity from storages to satisfy higher demand situations. The imports have sufficient potential to provide additional volumes over the winter, and however, in case of cold winter, the need of for such volumes can be higher than observed in recent history. So these import routes can offer enough capacities, enough flexibility to satisfy more demand situation. And what we did also, we did simulations with 15% at the end of winter. It's a hard constraints. And what we can say that if we are at a low storage level at the end of winter, it reduces the storage withdrawal capacities. And if we start to use the storages at the beginning of winter, of course, we will be at 55, we will decrease the withdrawal capacity in the middle of February, and we will be only at 55% of withdrawal capacity. So it's what we will observe during the next month. And we will check and we will communicate on this part during the next weeks. The Trans-Adriatic pipeline was commissioning in January 2021 or November 2020, and it introduces Caspian gas as a new source in Europe, and connecting to Greece and Italy, and after, of course, with the infrastructure, it can provide gas, Caspian gas to other countries. We can go to the next slides. Thank you. So here you have the supply route disruptions that we are testing with winter supply outlook. So we tested 4 different supply route disruptions: the Algerian pipe disruptions, the Belarus pipe disruptions, and we don't see any impact on the demand. We can satisfy all the demand. You find here, you can see here the results for the Ukrainian transit disruptions and the disruption of imports to Baltic states and Finland. For the Ukrainian transit disruptions, the new infrastructure in the southeastern Europe countries improved the situation with Turk Stream. This Turk Stream almost fully mitigating the exposure to demand curtailment in case of Ukrainian disruption. What we can see here in a peak day So we can see with storage level higher than 39% in February. That means that we, at the end of winter, we should be at 30%. Countries in the risk group are exposed to only 2% of demand curtailment, which could be mitigated by demand response in these countries. And all exposed to Ukraine can be maintained. And what we did, of course, the same simulations with 50% at the end of winter. And what we can say is that we will have only 30% storage level in February. And most of the countries part of the risk group will be exposed to 14% of demand curtailment. It's why it's important to consider that if we we are using a lot the storages as supply at the beginning of winter. We could be in risk in case of high demand situation or transit supply route disruptions. For the disruptions of imports to Baltic states and Finland, we slightly improved the situation since winter supply outlook 2020-21. Because we have LNG in these countries now. We improve the situation between Estonia and Finland. And in a peak day or 2-week spell, Baltic states and Finland are exposed to a significant level of demand curtailment, 8% to 74%. And those countries are facing infrastructure limitations since alternative energy import capacities are fully used and they are not connected to other European countries. So these are the supply route disruptions. We can go to the next slide, and I will just expose the winter review, some winter review main points for the previous winter 2020-2021. During the previous winter, LNG supply has decreased from 700 terawatt-hour to 470 terawatt-hour in the context of high Asian demand and delayed delivery due to blockage of Suez Canal. So it was at the end of winter. Oversupply sources remain at similar levels compared to 2019-2020, with slight increase in Algeria, Norway, and Russia. With the Trans-Adriatic pipeline commissioning in November 2020, we have a new source of gas for Europe, connected to Greece and Italy. And the storage levels at the end of winter season reached 336 terawatt-hour. This is the lowest seen in recent 4 winters due to record high EGS utilization, 770 terawatt-hour during the rather cold winter 2020-2021. And we can go now to the conclusion. Thank you. So, conclusion of this winter supply outlook are the following. The indigenous production keeps on following of a decreasing trend. The European gas infrastructure has been fully operational and functioning during summer, and this status is expected to be maintained for winter season. On 1st October, the EU storage level 75% is one of the lowest in the recent 9 years, with only 831 terawatt-hour, with different geographical situations for 2 main reasons. First one, record high use of storage flexibility during the previous winter, resulting in low level of storage, 336 terawatt-hour at the beginning of injection season. Low injection during summer while observing unusual high gas prices. The European gas system offers sufficient flexibility to ensure the security of gas supplies in Europe. and provided gas can be imported on a similar level as in recent history. However, in case of cold winter, the import needs for the European Union could be 5% to 10% higher than in the recent years, and the low storage level at the end of winter season could expose some countries sorry, to demand curtailment in case of extreme temperature and supply disruptions. And as we said before, LNG plays an important role as a flexible supply source and could be imported in volumes comparable to recent years if necessary, of course. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. And I give the floor to Luca and to Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. Now without further ado, we can move to the second presentation by Lucas on the winter outlook from the ENTSO-E perspective. The floor is yours, Lucas.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Jacques. So indeed, just before starting with this slide, I will just mention that the information which Jacques just presented to you, this is the information which we also took into account when we were performing the electricity winter outlook assessment. So in light of this, in this messages that that the gas supply under the cold peak day or a 2-week cold spell would be more or less sufficient unless there are some supply route disruptions. We performed this adequacy assessment as well. So certain expectations of the situation in the gas system were also reflected in our assessment. And yes, before, of course, going into all the details, for a nice introduction, I would also would like to present what is the seasonal adequacy assessment, which is actually the winter outlook which we are going to perform. So in this whole range of various ENTSO-E products, you can see that we perform various assessments looking at different time horizons, starting from more than 10 years ahead. And ending up to the week ahead assessments. And today I would like to focus, of course, on the seasonal, which you see just as a third block from the left, where we will be talking about adequacy assessment looking in the future for a few months. In our case, it's around 6 months ahead, as we always start our adequacy assessment somewhere September, October, doing the actual assessment. Of course, the work starts a bit earlier than that, but the actual adequacy assessment, we start in that point of time. So during this time, we, of course, take a look a few months ahead. So we make some estimates of how the power system could look like in a few months. And this is done basically to support some operational decisions which the TSOs are making. We also do this to inform every market participant that they could also get a quality insights of the potential situation in the power system, and in this way also to support them to facilitate their decisions as well. So Luca, if you could go to the next slide. I think that, yeah, it just highlights where we stand. And in this slide, we present our approach towards the seasonal outlook assessment. And here, what we do actually in the step 1 is we always start assessment looking at the expected adequacy situation under normal market operational conditions, which means that we really focus on what can happen in day-ahead markets based on the information which we have in September. So for example, in September, we collected all known planned outages and we try to assess what would be the impact for the adequacy in the coming winter. Also, what we do as well is that we also consider only the expected resources available in the market, whether it's generation, exchange capacities, or DSR capacities, but we only focus on the resources which are expected to participate in electricity market. That means that if there are some resources which are available for TSOs as an exceptional resources to be activated during the scarcity moments, we of course exclude them because we want to see if there is a probability that the TSOs would need to utilize those resources. So after doing this step one and identifying all the potential risks that the consumers might be not sufficiently supplied through the market mechanism, we then proceed to the step two, and then we analyze if the available non-market resources would be sufficient in Europe to cope with those adequacy risks. And here we consider the activation in various places, of course, in Europe, and that also means that we also consider the European cooperation, meaning that member states would be supporting each other by activating their non-market resources to support each other. As a disclaimer, of course, we have to say that typically the regulations might be a bit vague in this dimension, and the actual operational, decisions might be different from our assumption. But so far, in our experience, we always saw the TSOs and the member states cooperating quite tightly with each other. So this assumption should be quite fair in our assessment. And then as the last step, we have the optional step here. What we are doing typically is an ad hoc investigations, what we are doing. So based on the results in step one mostly, and also it could be applied the same approach for the step two results, is we try to analyze the results more in details and try to understand what is happening and why we are identifying some risks in our system, so that it could give more quality information for TSOs as well as for you today gathering here, or anyone reading our adequacy assessment report. So having these three steps in mind, it gives you a comprehensive picture of the typical seasonal adequacy assessment, and this is exactly what we have performed this year for Winter Outlook 2021-2022. Luca, can you switch the slide to another one? Yes. And thank you very much. And this is indeed the slide where we are starting to talk about the winter trends in available thermal generation. And basically, we are trying to present you the context under which we have performed the adequacy assessment. And what you can see here in the slide is there are two main parts. On the left part, in the bar charts, you can see the considered evolution of generation fleet. And then on the right part side, you can see also the considered planned outage information aggregated for the whole Europe, for just to keep the general message. Of course, if you would ever wish to find a more detailed information about the numbers behind these figures, you can always refer to our input data set publications and derive more detailed information. But this would become, of course, too lengthy webinar, so we prefer just to focus on the high-level numbers on the power pan-European power system. So starting from the left side of the picture, you can see in the red bars the changes of the thermal power plants in Europe. And what we can see is that we have in general a decrease of the thermal capacity by 6.4 gigawatts. And this is mainly led by nuclear decommissionings in Europe, but on the other hand, part of this is compensated by the gas commissionings in Europe. But overall, it still remains a downward trend for the thermal capacity, and this is what we are recording already a few years in a row, I believe. Meanwhile, actually, we are also recording an increase of the renewable generation, and it's mainly wind and solar. And the total increase is over 14 gigawatts, which is in numbers, of course, it's way larger than the thermal capacity decrease. But of course, it has been iterated for more than 10 years, I guess that the renewable capacity is not compensating thermal capacity on one-to-one basis, because it's a different capacity. So we are comparing dispatchable capacity and variable generation capacity. Yeah, of course, if someone would be comparing these numbers, he should be taking this into account himself. So anyways, in our assessment, we try to see how these changes are impacting the adequacy, and the results later will show you that. Meanwhile, also in terms of the planned outages, maybe it's a short message here, is that on one hand, we observe this typical V-shape of planned outage where we have decreasing planned outages towards the 1st of January, and then the planned outages slowly starts increasing. Actually, it remains quite flat through January and February, and then it starts increasing towards the spring. So this is something very common, because in January and February, the most severe weather conditions could be recorded in some power systems, of course. And then as last message is also this red line graph just indicates you the how it compares with the planned outages compared to the last winter. And yes, in general, it seems that more or less they are lower planned outages, except maybe this moment in the January where we see a slight increase, and maybe in the second part of January, compared to our assumptions made last winter, when we performed last winter adequacy assessment, meaning winter 2020, winter 2021. So this is the overall context, and on top of that, I can just remind you the context of the gas supply. So in light of this, we consider that we can rely on all gas capacity available in Europe, and we consider, of course, all their capabilities to supply the consumers in Europe. And having this in mind, we can switch to the next slide, where we can see just as a last slide before we switch to the results. And this is the slide just presenting you the non-market resources, which we considered in the step 2 computations. So these are the additional capacities where we considered that these could be supporting the European power system when there would be a risk for a lack of supply in Europe. So just as for your general information, just to understand what can be driving the changes, and in the map you probably cannot see, I can just stress that in Malta we also have a certain amount of capacity there designed specifically for this reason. So just having this information in mind, now we can definitely switch to the slide with the results. Luca, can you help us? Yes, thank you. So indeed, so this is the slide summarizing the key results, what we identified for the coming winter. So the risks we identified were captured in Ireland, in France, and in Malta. So on the left hand map, you can see the results from the step 1, which I mentioned, how we expect the situation would look like in the market. Under the normal market operations, and on the right hand side we see the situation how it would look like after activating the non-market resources. And the key difference, what we can see here, is in Malta, because they have a certain capacity, and it really helps them to cope with even those particular situations which are actually not even exceptional. They are long-term expected it's basically a long-term normal situation, and this is the reason why they have those non-market resources to cope not only with adequacy risks, but also with various others operational challenges. And this is something quite particular for the small power systems like Malta. On the other hand, the risks in Ireland and France, they are not really changing, because if you still remember the previous slide, there are no non-market resources in those particular countries, and they would need to, in this case, they would need to rely to some exceptional measures by the TSOs to avoid load shedding. And what can happen in worst cases, of course, just a controlled and gradual load shedding in case of really tight supply situation in coming winter. What could be very interesting also to mark here is that the bubbles indicates the magnitude of those risks, if I can call it so. And we can see that, yes, France has a bit pronounced, and in Ireland we see more or less sort of traces of those risks for the coming winter. Luca, if you could move to the next slide, it could show us a bit more details about how the risks distribute over the season. And in this slide, everyone, you can see the loss of load probability metric as such, which indicates in which particular weeks of the year we can expect most of the risks to occur. And what we can see here is that in France, for this example, we see that the risks are peaking around January and February, and this is something what is rather expected, as these risks are driven by potential cold spell events or severe cold spell events in our database. And this is something what we are expecting every year, and also our French members, RT colleagues, are always monitoring this situation. And of course, these risks, as any other risks, are closely being monitored, and they are even more addressed closer to the real time, and especially through the week ahead adequacy assessments, which are being performed closer to the real time when we have a more certain information about the weather forecast, and any more accurate mitigation measures can be also planned in those instances. Then if you take a look to the Ireland, we see also some risks around week 9. And elevated risks, I would say. Whereas in general the risks remains to a certain degree throughout the season. The main reason for this elevated risk in week 9 is a planned outage in Ireland, which just reduces the available capacity in this power system, and hence, yeah, the risk slightly increases here. But overall, what we can mention in Ireland is that Irish power system has two distinguished features, I would call them so. One thing is quite high wind generation capacity, and that means that if there is a good wind conditions in Ireland, there should be no adequacy risks. And on the other hand, we also noticed that the power plants in Ireland, the conventional ones, the thermal ones, are aging, and their probabilities to experience forced outage or unplanned outage, a break of some elements within the power plant, which just cuts the generation of it, is quite high. So this is somewhat expected, and this is why we are expecting those risks being captured in our assessment, even if the magnitude is rather low, as just presented in the previous slide. So the long story in short, the situation is also being monitored in Ireland continuously, and especially the wind conditions are of high importance there, and as long as the wind blows, there should be no big concerns in Ireland. But anyways, the situation should be and is always followed quite closely. And last but not least, what I mentioned about Malta. So what we see here in the very first week, we have a high mark of 100% under the normal market conditions. And here the key message is that it's this indicator, it doesn't really indicate the risk that the consumers can be affected, but rather it indicates the chance that Malta system operator would need to activate their non-market resources. And then you can see that the risks in the dark blue line decreases substantially after activating those non-market resources. And the same is also true for the week 10. These are the risks basically associated with the particular planned outages in Malta power system. In the week 48, actually it's this week, there is a scheduled planned outage of interconnection with Italy, and during these instances, or even if there is a break of this interconnection between those two systems, Malta is always activating, almost always activating the dedicated resources. And the same applies for week 10 when there is a planned outage of some thermal power plant in Malta. So in general, those non-market resources are doing quite a good job in Malta, and they are addressing those challenges quite effectively, and the risks in Malta remain rather minimal. So overall, this is something what we have performed. I tried to verbally present you this additional analysis which we perform as usually to understand what are the risks behind them. So in France, it's basically the severe weather conditions mostly. In Ireland, is the risk could be associated with the planned and unplanned outage of aging units combined with the wind conditions. And in Malta, they are mostly driven by some planned outage activities throughout the season. And in Malta, additional notice that these non-market resources are addressing those challenges quite well, and the risk to the consumers should remain quite low. Nevertheless, everywhere the situation is being closely monitored, not only in these three countries. The situation is being monitored in whole Europe quite closely, closer to the real time, because our assessment was performed considering the information available in September, late September, and the power system is continuously changing. So, of course, the actual events can differ from it can be slightly different what we identify, but these adequacy results really should support the TSOs as well as you to get some grasp of the key risks of key risks for the coming winter. So I believe this was the last slide which I have prepared for you, and I believe, Luca, we can switch now to the following part of the webinar.
Yes, thank you, Lukasz, for the thorough presentation. Yeah, so just we go for a 5-minute break, and we come back perhaps at 10 to 11. So see you in 5 minutes, 10 to 11. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. So yeah, after the 5-minute break, we can perhaps go for some questions from the floor. Yeah, feel free to type your questions in the chat box. Even right now, I'll pick up your questions live. In the meantime, I would like to ask Lukas if there are any changes. I mean, in comparison to the winter outlook of last year, are there any specific changes or updates between this version and last year?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, we have introduced, I would say, one essential update towards our assessments, and it is linked to the update of the Pan-European Climate Database, as it was updated in 2021 at ENTSO-E. Sorry, Luca? Everything's fine? Luca, can you confirm that you can still hear me? Well, apparently, let me check if you're still
hear Lukas.
Yeah, we can hear you, Lukas.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I assume that everyone can hear me. So continuing the answer, we have updated the Pan-European Climate Database at ENTSO-E for various studies, and this also includes seasonal adequacy assessments. But this time it was the first time we have updated it, we have used it for seasonal adequacy assessment. And the major thing behind this update is that we have considered an impact of the climate change to a certain degree on the electricity consumption. So the logic behind is that before we could we were relying on the historical measurement-based data aging from 1982 to 2016, and we were using those historical data as they were recorded. Now, the new database addresses the climate change to a certain degree by adjusting those historical years for the expected climate of today, meaning that the 1982 or 1985 or 1989 were adjusted to the levels of 2020s, as well as it was also the same case for any year between 2000 and 2010, but the adjustments were of course of different degrees because the older years were further in the past, so they needed a bigger adjustment. So this was the logic of the update, and this is what was updated for all ENTSO-E studies, including the seasonal adequacy assessments. I believe that Luca now is our moderator has disconnected probably for some reasons. So if you don't mind, I can check if you have any answers. So I will take the role from Luca. And I will try to cover and see if he will manage to reconnect anytime. And I see that we also have just a few minutes remaining. So yeah, Modesto Gabriele, I see the question about the non-market resources and which is the impact of capacity market and the reduction of risk of energy not served. So I would suggest maybe for you to open the report, and we have listed all non-market resources, and we also try to indicate their impact on the adequacy, as well as you could have seen today in the figures, like the two maps side by side and seeing decreasing bubbles as well as the line graphs. I just want to quickly also take a look at the other questions, if there would be more specific which was not addressed today or in the report to answer. So I would really appreciate if you could just open it in the report. So are there any specific actions taken as preparation and chief of the person? Yeah, so I see probably one point which relates to the gas, but it's more on the electricity power system. The question is if we see any risk of limited gas supplies impacting power plants as such. So to this extent, what we are expecting based on also the insights from ENTSO-E colleagues is that yes, there is a surge of probably gas prices. It's very uncertain how long it will last and to which degree it can have an impact. But overall, from the power system perspective, we still see that the gas supply should be more or less sufficient for the power plants to ensure the adequacy. Yes, it could have the impact on the utilization of those power plants due to the gas prices and market situations. But overall, we expect that both markets, the gas and electricity, would ensure the optimal allocation of those resources to the consumers where it's needed. That means that you know, if the situation would become really tight in the power system, we are quite confident that the gas would be ensured to those power plants by the reflection of those prices in both markets. Whereas on the other hand, if the situation gets very tight on the gas side and it's quite mild for electricity side, we are sure that then those gas resources could be used by the other industries as well. So we are truly in belief that those markets should manage to allocate those resources where it's most needed, and there should be little or even no risk that there would be insufficient gas for the power plants. So yes, I see, Luca, that you have joined us, and I just try to address the two questions, and I believe that I have managed to do this. And I was just wondering what would your recommendation to do further on, because we got additional couple of questions and we are almost on the time to close this call. So yes, it's up to you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Lukasz. So sorry if I had some technical issues and I had to leave the call because I could not hear anyone for a second. So I just left the call and came back. Unless we have other questions, I suggest we close the webinar. I understand there are other questions, but I can't see them on the chat. I don't know if it's
they
still
are
my
in
problem.
dedicated question section.
Sorry?
But they have left in a dedicated question section. But if you think that we are really tight on time, especially as people probably also plan,
yes,
we could probably commit to answer them by email.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely fine, yeah. That's fine for me. So Lukasz, I don't know why I lost I can't share the presentation anymore. So just to recommend, you know, the event taking place next week, and then I suggest we close the webinar. So if you don't mind to show the presentation.
Sure.
And indeed, yeah, in the meantime, we can also announce We can also inform you that the winter outlook will be published on the ENTSO-E website and ENTSO website today. So you can visit our websites and have a look at the publication.
Seems like I shared the wrong screen. And yeah, probably I even have it closed. So I suggest that probably I even stop sharing it. And apologies from my side. Actually, I was not sure why. Maybe let's do this following thing. I'm just adding the link to the event or into the chat for everyone if they are super interested. This could be very useful for them, in my opinion. And yeah, apologies for these technical inconveniences from my side at least.
Okay, yes, in the meantime, yeah, as we mentioned, on Tuesday, 7th of December, there will be a very interesting event co-organized by ENTSO-E, Renewables, Grid Initiative, and IUCN, a conference on optimizing energy and empowering nature. And the aim of this conference is to indeed keeping in mind the climate objectives related to the decarbonization of the power sector, of the energy sector. How can we ensure that the right infrastructures are in place to enable indeed decarbonization, while at the same time keeping in mind you know, the enhancement of nature, the protection of nature and our ecosystem. So it will be about striking the right balance between infrastructure needs and protection of our nature. Keynote speeches will be delivered by our president Hervé Lafay and by the Director General of IUCN Bruno Oberle. If you want to register to the conference, please visit the event website, which I can share here in the chat box very briefly. And yes, with this little promotion, I just have to thank Jacques and Lucas very much for your time and for your presentations. I hope it was clear and exhaustive for everyone. And yeah, if you have any questions or if you need any clarifications on the winter outlook, please feel free to drop an email to Lucas and to Jack, or also to me, and I'll make sure we'll make sure that your inquiries are responded to. So feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much to all the participants for joining us, and yeah, I wish you a good rest of the day, and don't forget to visit our website to consult the publication. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.